Well, let's welcome to the Private Practice Elevation Podcast, Brent Stutzman. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Looking forward to speaking to your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for reaching out and excited to learn from you. I'm really excited for today's topic. So we're going to be talking about how to position yourself as the number one trusted practice in your area, which I'm sure anyone listening is probably intrigued as well. How do I do that? So
Yep.
before we get into that, why don't you share a little bit about yourself? What you do, obviously, and then how did you get started doing what you're doing today, helping therapists really market, position themselves, and grow and scale their practices?
Yeah, great question. So, about 7 years ago now, my wife came home from the agency she was working at. She was getting her hours in. She's a therapist. And she said, Brent, I want to start my own private practice. I want to be private pay, and I just want to work with kids like ages 2 to 12. And I said, okay, we never started a business before. I never started. My wife was a violinist in a former life. And so she had her own studio, but I mean, I never did it. And she said, Brent, I need you to do the branding and marketing. Well, I didn't have a branding marketing degree. We didn't have any, we didn't have savings to like pay someone to build us a really nice website.
Hmm.
I didn't know how to do the branding. Like I didn't know how to do anything. And we had twin girls who were 2 years old at the time. So
Oh,
we were
wow.
still sleep deprived. And she was 7 months pregnant, 6 or 7 months pregnant with our son, Simeon. And we really wanted to live in the Chicagoland area because we had family there.
Hmm.
And if anyone who knows about the Chicagoland area, like any kind of metropolis, you kind of need two incomes to really make it work. And so we needed two incomes to make this work. So we couldn't really fail at this endeavor. And so what happened is I went down the rabbit hole of marketing, building WordPress websites, email. I mean, just all the things. And I enjoyed it. But I also really understood that we needed to position ourselves in a way that we could be a trusted authority in the area that we had. So like, how do we do that with this? Like basically starting from scratch. My wife was, when we launched, she was a new therapist in some way. She's had some experience. So like how do we do all that? So we went
Yeah.
into video. Like I learned how to do video. If you look at our YouTube channel, Kid Matters Counseling, like the early videos, like the quality was bad. Now it's better. But so that's kind of how it all started. And then I had a friend. I said because we launched Kid Matters Counseling, and that went really well. And like we had a waiting list before we even started. Like
Wow.
that was crazy. Learning Google Ads and all that other stuff. So I had another friend which the Google ads were actually very helpful back in the day. They're trickier these days, but I had a friend. I was like, hey, I like you as a person. He's a therapist, and I was like, I think you have a great like brand that we could like promote. So if you ever want to start a private practice, just let me know. And he said, well, yeah, I do. And I said, all right, well, let's scale it up. So we partnered and did that. And 6 years later, it's two locations with over 20 some therapists. So I basically learned a set of skills that other therapists needed to help scale their practices. So
Right.
not just from the marketing side, but operations. So that's kind of a little bit of an origin story and how I did that. Along the way, I learned about story and story brand and positioning yourself as a guide in the lives of
Hmm.
the community. So we're going to be the communities that you serve. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that today.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. We kind of have a similar story because my wife
Do
my
we?
wife
Yeah.
is the therapist and I'm not the therapist, and she
You
wasn't working in.
probably pass exams though, Daniel. I mean, you probably know enough to be pretty dangerous at this point.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been over 10 years now, so I got a little bit of practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, she wasn't in an agency, but she got her she went through, getting licensed. We moved to Georgia when we got married, so like we were kind of reestablishing both of our lives here in
Mhm.
Atlanta, and so it took her a while to get her hours in and get licensed and all that good stuff. But then she decided to leave a group practice and go into private pay, and so my background is all the website stuff, and so that
Yeah.
was when I dove in, same sort of thing, like, okay,
Yeah.
like let's do this. We got to make it work. So we're going to make a great website. We're going to use WordPress, and we're just going to learn how to get you in front of people.
That's right. Yep.
And then you
That's
just do
great. Yeah,
it.
I love that. I love the husband and wife teams. I think that's
Yeah,
awesome. I think
yeah.
it's really great.
It's fun. She's my guinea pig. I try out new strategies and things on her.
Same thing.
Like, let's create this page on your website because I think you need it, and let's optimize it and see what happens. So it's
Yes.
fantastic.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's why don't you take us into the topic that you have for us today about positioning yourself as the number one trusted practice in your area. So that's a big topic. So why don't
Yeah.
you start us at the beginning? Yeah, where do we begin with that?
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of the problem I think we're going to try to solve today for our listeners is in order to become the number one trusted private practice in your community, you need to stop playing the hero and instead be the guide in the lives of the people in the communities that you serve. So when people come to you for help, they are not looking for a hero.
Mm,
They're looking for a trusted guide. So in this podcast episode, I think what I'm going to show you is kind of a framework and some easy things that you can do to use that, leverage the power of story, position yourself as a guide, and really become that trusted private practice in your community. So it'll be fun. I'm going to give you a little neuroscience, and then we're going to jump into some like contemporary examples of in movies, and then we're going to give you some application. So that's the
awesome.
plan.
Sounds great.
Okay, so the brain is really designed, and this is really from Story Brand. This is really from Story. The brain is really designed to do two things. The first thing is to help you survive and thrive. And the second thing it's supposed to do is conserve calories. So the brain's dominant job is to do these things. And what this
Mhm.
means for you is that you need to communicate something about you or your practice and your clinical skills that will help potential clients survive and thrive. So think about if you go to a party or maybe you're at church or something, and someone asks you, what did you do this week? And they start talking about how they went to the grocery store, they went out to eat with a friend, their son Jimmy has a college application he had to finish, but they ran out of broccoli at the grocery store and that's Jimmy's favorite food. And they just keep going on like that. You could probably hang on, like even as I was saying that, you're sort of like, where's he going with this, right? So, but you could probably hang on for about 30 seconds with him before your brain starts to drift off and you start to
Mhm.
think about that unfinished house product or project,
Mhm.
what you need to fix for dinner that night, or laundry that you need to, that kind of one
Yeah.
resolved thing at work. Like that's where your brain starts to go. The same thing is how you talk about your business. If you're at a block party and someone asks you, like, what do you do? And you start doing like crazy psychobabble, like, I'm a therapist that uses sensory motor integration to help people expand their self-regulatory capacity to enhance their executive functioning skills, or, whatever, right?
Right.
So that person you're talking to, their brain is like scanning all that information that you're giving them. And it's sort of like, yeah, this is pretty confusing. This isn't going to help you survive and thrive. Time to
Mhm.
move on. And so their brain is going to be turning off and begin to think about those things that will help them survive and thrive. The
Right.
second thing your brain is trying to do is conserve calories. So the adult average brain burns 350 to 450 calories in a day. And if you're doing a lot of cognitive work like creative thinking, creative writing, you're burning even more calories. And a grandmaster chess player can burn over 500 calories playing just 2 hours of chess. And they are sitting down the whole time. And
Wow.
many of us have experienced some of this exhaustion because if we go to a conference or a training, right, we're just sitting all day in a chair for 5 or 6 hours and you're just exhausted by the end of the day. The same thing is when you
Right.
work with clients. Like if you're fully engaged with your clients, your brain's engaged, you're processing all this information, like you feel exhausted and you literally like the most exercise you got was like going to the refrigerator and eating lunch, right? Because you've just been sitting down all day. So going back to the point is our brains are there to conserve calories. And our brain has this mechanism that's going to say, hey, this information isn't helpful for you, or it is. If it isn't helpful, your brain's gonna be like, yeah, we need to stop burning calories and go focus on something else that's gonna help us survive and thrive. Or I'm gonna kick you into daydreaming mode and you're gonna start thinking about that vacation by the beach. So that's kind of the role of the brain there. So I want you to imagine your potential client running on a treadmill, right? So how long do you think you can confuse them before they stop being interested in you or your website? And I want you to think about your website right now. Like, are you communicating things to help your client survive and thrive? Or are you making them burn too many calories? And this
Mm.
is even more critical for people seeking mental health support. Like their life is in crisis. They are grieving. Their brain is more distressed and tired. And their
Mhm.
ability to focus and engage is already at a disadvantage. So you don't want to be clever. You don't want to be cute. You don't want to be vague. But it's an
Mhm.
opportunity for you because the therapist who can simply and clearly communicate how they can help them and position themselves as a guide, right?
Mhm.
and the potential client's brain is really going to latch on to that brand message or what your website or what are you saying to help them. It's going to latch on like Velcro because their brain is looking for something to help them survive and thrive. And if you
Right.
do that well, you're going to get more clients. So
Right.
this is a big story brand. Like if you confuse, you lose, right? If you
Yeah.
confuse potential clients, you're going to lose them. And you don't want confusion because confusion is really the enemy to scaling your practice and really positioning yourself as that trusted guide in your community. So think about only communicate about something that helps your ideal client survive and thrive. And it must be so clear and so simple that they don't have to burn any calories to understand you.
Yeah.
And so this is why storytelling is so important. Everybody pays attention when a story starts. And that's why you can sit in a movie theater for 2 hours or binge watch Netflix for like 5 hours and your brain won't daydream once. If it's a
Mhm.
good story, your brain is sticking with it.
Right.
It's almost like story hijacks the brain a little bit. So here's the shift. If you want to book more clients or hire amazing clinicians or transform your community, don't tell your story. Invite clients into a story where your client is the hero and you are the guide to help them solve their problem and to win the day. So, if there's a new superpower I want to give all your listeners today, is to become better storytellers where you can position yourself as the guide and not the hero. And this is how you position your brand as the number one trusted practice in your community. So, before we dive into like kind of the steps to establish yourself as a guide, I'm curious, Dan, if you want to riff on this or had any thoughts on what I just said.
I just feel like you're preaching to the choir here because story brand is something that I discovered early on in my own business, and actually, I'm a like an old school Donald Miller fan, like
Oh,
from
you go
like
way
when
back to the
like
Minmores?
to like Blue Like Jazz and
Yeah.
like some of his older work. So I had like known him as an author, and then have kind of watched how he has transformed into this. Um, a guide for people with marketing. And so
Yep.
story brand, I kind of grabbed onto that early on, but so much of what you're saying is things that I know I've said here on this podcast that I have
Awesome.
taught in webinars and constantly see it too as someone who's consulting with therapists and looking over websites, trying to understand why am I not getting clients or why is my website not being picked up by Google? And
Hmm.
so many times we can see like there's such a lack of clarity. And with things, as simple as the first thing you see on your website is a quote. And that quote might be very meaningful to you and it might have a place in what you do and your marketing, but it doesn't really clearly say this is who I help and yeah, and like this is how we help them, like being
Yeah.
very, very clear. And you're just going to be losing people because it's not time to be clever and cute. People have so much that is going on in their world that they're thinking about.
Yeah.
And I think, thank you for bringing in sort of the neuroscience behind that. That makes so much more sense now why people would jump off your website, not engage with you,
Yeah.
because it's not clear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just think about how you engage with the internet and how you like search for things and how much patience you have for a website that isn't really talking about what you need or how to solve a problem. There's so many therapy websites out there that doesn't even mention at the top that there are counselors or therapists, right?
Right.
Maybe it is just that quote in the picture of a placid lake. And you're like,
Hmm.
are you selling like vacation trips to this lake? Like
Right.
what, you know what I mean? So, and you really only have like 3 or 4 seconds to convince someone to
Yeah.
keep scrolling down on your website, or they're going to go to your competition, right? They'll just bounce off.
Right.
So you're like, people's brains and attention spans, they just don't have time to mess around.
Yeah.
So keeping it very simple. Like if you go to Kid Matters Counseling, it says, we are child therapists counseling kids ages 2 to 12. That is the header.
That's it.
Like,
That's
because you
clear.
just want like because you're just like, okay, I'm the potential, the person searching for counseling for their kid, they're like, okay, I'm in the right place,
Right.
right? Like
Hmm.
you literally just have 3 seconds to let them know they've landed in the right place, and
Yeah.
then you start to build that authority out through the rest of the website and some other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's true.
Yeah.
And
We got to
here's the thing: I
keep them
became a
there.
story brand guide. I pay Donald Miller money every year to be called a certified guide because I've seen it work when I launched those first 2 private practices. And since then, I've launched like 12 other ones with practice, at least 12 across the country. And I use the same framework and it works every time. It
Hmm.
just works.
Yeah.
And so that's why, like I said before, like I've drank the Kool-Aid. and it's helpful, right?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. I'll say this before we move on. It's like every therapist, every practice owner needs a framework for their branding and marketing. And just like you have a framework in therapy and how to help people change and how to help people heal, you also need that for your marketing. So I
Right.
just found like my brain latched on the story brand because I was like, I have a problem,
Hmm.
and it seems like this framework is going to help me solve that problem,
Right.
and it has, and it did. So I
Yeah.
just leaned into it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, why don't you take us into how do we then position ourselves or our private practice as the guide to our ideal clients?
Yeah. Okay. So I've kind of Donald Miller talks to two ways, and I really broke it down to more like four or five. So there's some, and then I'm just using story here. I'm going to Hollywood. I'm going to classic literature in some ways to talk about this. So I think there's really kind of five steps to build that deep and abiding trust with a hero,
Hmm.
with the hero, and those are your clients. And if you're going to clearly articulate your guideness, where the hero is not burning calories, and then you
Hmm.
invite them into a story of transformation, and you'll gain their trust. I really think there's like five ways
Hmm.
that you can do this. Okay, and then so I'm going to outline the five ways, and we're just going to dive a little bit into some literature and movies to
Sweet.
how they do this. All right, so okay, the first one is really you want to demonstrate empathy and provide a sense of safety.
Mm.
So therapists are amazing at providing empathy and creating a space of safety. So the way they do this in story is sort of like, I'm sorry you have to go on this difficult journey, right? Um, I'm going to help you. They kind of create a series of a situation where the hero feels comfortable and kind of making mistakes. Maybe that's training. Maybe that's something. They don't put them right in front of the danger right away, but they kind of provide a safety to kind of build not only just trust with the guide, but also kind of their own instincts and being able to get ready to go on this healing journey or this
Hmm.
journey.
Yeah.
The other one is they demonstrate authority. So books and movies might say, this road may be difficult, but I've done this before and I can show you how to get there.
Hmm.
The other one is the guide. This is number three. The guide will illuminate the problem. So the reason why this evil is existing, or the reason why this evil is happening, is because of this. So they explain to the hero a little bit of why they might be going through this problem or having
Hmm.
this problem. They provide a plan. And so this is sort of like, all right, this is how you're going to defeat evil and win the day. All right. So a very simple plan on those next steps that need to happen. And then they provide a very clear call to action, right? It's time to begin. It's time to start. So I want to give a couple. So those are the five things. They demonstrate empathy and provide a sense of safety. They demonstrate authority. They illuminate the problem. They provide a plan, and they call the hero to action. Classic storytelling.
Hmm.
Okay, so like I was going through Harry Potter with my kids. We just finished up book four, but
My
in
favorite.
book three, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, I loved it. In the book three, The Prisoner of Azkaban, in chapter three, and I highlighted this on page 91. Here's how J.K. Rowling describes Dumbledore, and I'm curious. I'll give you a little test, Daniel. How do you see um, J.K. Rowling establishing Dumbledore as a guide in this? Okay, so just a
Okay.
short paragraph. This is soon after Harry encountered the Dementors on the train.
Hmm.
So Professor Dumbledore, though very old, always gave an impression of great energy. He had several feet of long silver hair and beard, half moon spectacles, and extremely crooked nose. He was often described as the greatest wizard of the age, but that wasn't why Harry respected him. You couldn't help trusting Albus Dumbledore, and as Harry watched him beaming around at the students, he felt really calm for the first time since the Dementor had entered the train compartment.
Mm.
So, what do you think? Like, how is J.K. kind of positioning Dumbledore more as this guide for Harry?
Well, I kind of hear like he's very old, so it's kind of like
Yes.
he's been around the block. He's seen a thing or two, um, and also too that he's the greatest wizard in the world. So that experience is kind of
Mhm.
there, but then also his the way the energy that he brings and just like the peace that he brings, like that's kind of establishing trust, like kind of what you said early
Yeah.
on of just like
Yeah.
creating that safe space for him to experience what he's experienced and take something to him eventually that he's
Hmm.
going through.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Harry feels really safe with Albus Dumbledore because he's powerful, he's strong, and I know Harry's very young at this, and and he feels safe around him, which is really interesting. Um, and we'll know that as Harry Potter progresses, Albus Dumbledore eventually leaves, goes away, right? He dies. And
Spoiler.
yeah, spoiler. Yeah. I mean, it's been out for a while now. Yeah. But like, but that's also very common in storytelling. The
Yeah.
guide eventually leaves, and then
Yeah.
that is when the hero has to step up,
Yeah.
right? But the guide has done everything to prepare
Hmm.
that hero to face the evil that awaits. It's very classic.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so let's jump into a couple other guides. I'm going through Lord of the Rings with my kids right now, loving it. Like this is like my ultimate like dream dad. Like we get to so
Yeah.
Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings,
You're like
right?
speaking my language today. Like
Yeah.
these are my top books right here. So my top
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah. We finished The Hobbit, now we're in the Lord of the Rings, but Gandalf, probably the greatest guide in the history of literature. Like I
Mm,
just and the way that the books and the movies, like you just can't help but love Gandalf, right?
hmm
Dumbledore, we talked about in Harry Potter. We have Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda in Star Wars.
hmm
We have Whoopi Goldberg and Ghost. I don't know if you
hmm
remember that movie. She's like
Yeah, it's been
helps.
a while.
It's been a while, but what a great like comedic. But she really kind of helps facilitate and helps unravel the mystery
Right.
for Sam and Molly, right? And to help facilitate closure between them. We have
hmm
Morpheus from The Matrix.
hmm
Here's a little deeper cut. Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you've ever seen
hmm
that animated series, coming out on Netflix in live action, looks good.
Oh, nice.
Hopefully, it's going to be great here in 2 weeks. We have Haymitch from the Hunger Games, right?
Yep.
Like he's gone through. He was
hmm
a champion before it, so he's got a guide Katniss. We have
Yeah.
Val Kilmer as Iceman in the second movie of Top Gun. So
hmm
he's like, come talk to me. So Tom Cruise goes and has this conversation with Iceman, and he's like, you got to do it. I
hmm
need you to lead the team.
hmm
Yeah, I love Top Gun Maverick. I love Top Gun. We have Mufasa in The Lion King,
Yep.
right? So when Simba's kind of lost, and he doesn't know where to go and what to do,
hmm
and Mufasa shows up. We have Genie in Aladdin. We
hmm
have Alfred and Batman. We have the head Covenant mother in The Sound of Music. When she's singing, climb every mountain. you
hmm
know, she's
Yep.
telling her Maria to go. And we have like a guide of trios. If you think about like Beauty and the Beast, there's kind of like this guy, like a trio of guides. You have
hmm
Lumiere, Cogsworth, and Mrs. Potts. They provide Belle with friendship, support, and also insight into what the problem is with the Beast.
hmm
Um, so anyways, I'll stop there, but like if you kind of go back, like these are some really like guides that just we've endeared ourselves to because they're so great, like we just
Right.
love them now.
Yeah.
But if you go back, what are they doing, right? They demonstrate empathy, they provide a sense of safety. Like I love that with Alfred, how many times he helps Batman in
hmm
different ways. He's
Yeah.
like the father figure,
Yeah.
right?
hmm
They help illuminate the problem. They provide a plan. They're calling them to action, like Morpheus in the
hmm
Matrix. What he does there. Oh man,
Yeah.
so good.
hmm
That dojo scene as he's training. Oh man, how to jump over buildings. So I'm going to stop there before I get in a little bit more into just some brief applications. But any thoughts on kind of the guidance and establish those kind of 5 steps or other guides you want to talk about?
Yeah, no, I think that you're using a lot of examples that I resonate with, and I love movies. I love stories. So like it's exciting to hear, but it's also um, it's just interesting to see if you haven't like viewed marketing in this way, like using story in this way. It's like for me, it was a light bulb moment when I was kind of putting these pieces together when it comes to
Mhm,
marketing. Like, oh yes, like this is what we are drawn to. Like
mhm,
our humanity is drawn to story and we are
mhm.
drawn to guides. And oh wow, like this is the way movies are written, stories are written, like it's
Yeah.
it's always there, and it's like there's something super inherently powerful in storytelling. And man, if we can kind of take that and use that in our own marketing, how just the impact that would create is, I think, amazing.
Yeah, I would love for your listeners, because I know, um, and you know, being married to a therapist, that therapists love certifications and getting more and more training.
Yeah.
So think about, if someone's listening right now and they're going through it, like I'm curious, answer to yourself, what was it that drew you to that particular person who was offering that certification or training? And why did you buy it?
Hmm.
What was it about that person? How did they establish themselves as a trusted guide that you were willing to open up your wallet and
Right.
pay them money to learn this thing
Right.
because you thought it was going to help solve a particular problem? And just
Hmm.
reflect on that, because I want you to be able to then kind of transpose that into your own marketing, into your own way, the way that you run your practice, and the way that you want to be able to position yourself as a guide in the community.
Hmm.
So I would love to be able to maybe just dive in a little, take those 5 applications or those 5 steps in
Yeah.
establishing your guidance, just kind of drill down a little bit. And
Yeah.
then we can riff on this a little bit more. So the first one I said, it was to demonstrate empathy and provide a sense of safety. So, you're like, I mean, you're trained to be able to provide empathy, right? Because
Right.
they're trained, because that helps build trust. Like, I see you, I see
Hmm.
you in your problem, right? So you're doing that in your therapy room, but maybe, what about your intake coordinator over the phone? Have you trained your intake coordinator to provide empathy or to help
Hmm.
create a sense of safety in just a few minutes so they can better understand what's going on? So we talked
Yeah.
about your website. Your website can do this pretty simply. Like, you could just have a simple statement like, it's really hard to be a parent of teenagers,
Mm.
right? And then how do you create a sense of safety? That's a little tricky on the website, but I think video is a great way to be able to
Yeah.
say, your personality. Just, do I even feel kind of safe with this person on video as they're watching me?
Right.
Do I like this person? Can I
Yeah.
trust this person?
Hmm.
Um, so your website can do this and do a lot of the heavy lifting for you on that.
Yeah.
Um, so any questions on that, on empathy and sense of
No,
safety?
no, that makes total sense.
Yeah. And you have to do this with your clinicians too, if you're a group practice owner.
Mm.
Like, it's hard being a clinician, right? So because a lot of people who want to work for you are also looking for a guide, and that's going to be
Yeah.
you just by default in some
Hmm.
way, sometimes
Yeah.
in a maternal or paternal way too.
Yeah.
Just the nature of your position.
Yeah.
The other one is demonstrate authority. Um, and therapists, they hate to talk about their experience, or they don't want to talk about who they are sometimes. It's more easy for them to talk about their favorite Netflix series, but most people don't care about that. They want to
Hmm.
know if they can trust you. So it's
Yeah.
okay to talk about your authority. And I like to think of it as a little bit like seasoning. So you don't want to, like, it's enough to make your food tasty, right?
Hmm.
If you don't have anything that's bland, but if you have just the right amount, it's going to leave an impression on
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So it's okay to talk about that you've had over 10 years experience in helping couples work through communication roadblocks.
Hmm.
It's okay to talk about a little bit about your PhD and what you focused on, or that you even
Hmm.
have one. You can call yourself a doctor, right? That's
Yeah.
okay. People are looking for a trusted guide that helps establish your guideness.
Yeah.
The other thing to demonstrate authority is really just provide great service. Like, if you do
Hmm.
really, 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 really good work, then they're going to talk about you and see you as a trusted guide, and talk
Right.
about you as a trusted guide in the communities that they live.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions on that, or thoughts, or?
No, I think that it makes total sense.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just like, keep going. Like, I love
Okay.
this.
All right. I'll keep
Yeah.
going. The other one is illuminates the problem. So I think this is a superpower that therapists have, is they
Hmm.
understand the problem pretty quickly to its core,
Yeah.
but they may lack the ability to kind of illuminate that problem in a simple way. They
Hmm.
might do it in a complex way. I think this is important, and especially that first appointment, is being able to name a little bit of the problem that they see is going on,
Yeah.
because that tells them, if they're able to illuminate that to the clients will be like, yes, they get me, they understand the problem, and I
Hmm.
trust them to help me get to that next spot. Because if they can see that in just 30 minutes of me talking to them, I wonder what can actually happen through, a series
Right.
of therapy appointments.
Yeah.
But they have to
Right.
be able to illuminate the problem a little bit
Yeah.
to their client, to the
Is
hero.
there is there a way to do that on the website, illuminating problems? Is that kind of maybe
Yeah,
naming some of the typical problems that people are
great.
facing, related to a
Yeah, blog
service?
posts. You go
Mm.
deep into one particular problem.
Mhm.
You have a video and you just clearly explain particular things. Now you know everyone's different, like the problem, but there's a lot of overlapping themes with common problems.
Yeah.
I think blog posts and videos in that way are a great way to show that. I think I have another webinar called how to build a powerful sales funnel, and we get into like lead generating PDFs and email.
Mhm.
Like is another great way to do that. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay,
Um,
cool.
yep. Provides a plan and calls them to action. Or actually, let's start with the provides a plan. So I think on your website, here's how you get started with counseling. Most people don't know how that happens. Don't assume that they know how to get started with counseling. So provide a
Yeah.
simple 3-step plan, whatever it is. I think in your intake conversations, uh, your intake coordinator or in that first appointment, you give them a simple plan and how to keep going. All right,
Mhm.
this is how it is. Let's get something on the calendar. All right, for the first couple weeks, we're going to be focusing on this and then this, right? So just a simple plan and how it keeps going.
Yeah.
Um, this is just coming from a marketing standpoint, but you could also do this from a hiring standpoint. How does your hiring process work if you want to hire clinicians? If you're going to do a speaking engagement, you're speaking, you're giving them a simple plan, like kind of what I did at the beginning. I said, here's how this podcast is going to go. All right. So they
Mhm.
know what to expect. Just providing a simple plan.
Mhm.
The next thing is calls into action. All right. It's time to begin your healing journey. Right. So they could
Mm.
be a simple schedule an appointment. Are you ready to get on the calendar? Um, I think you need to sign up for this group class, or I
Mhm.
think getting a battery of tests is the way to go to help understand what you're going through. Right. So you
Mhm.
can do this on your website. You can do this with intake calls.
Yeah.
When you're doing speaking engagements, maybe it's sign up for my newsletter to get more information because I share, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Always call them to action in some capacity.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm gonna stop there, and I'll just say this one last thing: is like the world needs therapists to be guides, and it
Mm.
doesn't take much to really establish yourself as a trusted guide. I think we talked about those 5 things. That's a great, easy, simple way to get going.
Yeah.
More therapists need to play the role of the guide and not the hero, and that is how you establish your practice in your community as like the number one trusted practice. If you
Mhm.
see yourself as the guide, always think of yourself as the guide. You are there to help. You're there to help illuminate a problem, provide them a plan, call them to action, show empathy, create a sense of safety, because that's what people are looking for.
Yeah.
And if you do that well, you're going to lodge them. You're going to lodge your brand. Your brand is going to be in their brain and that their mental Rolodex as the number one practice um, for this particular problem that
Yeah.
they have. So,
Mhm.
so I'll end with that, and we can talk a little bit more about what we talked about. But
Yeah.
that's how you do it.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that it can be such a shift, to thinking this way. And I think that, again, like I look at so many websites and there's so many websites that are just purely informational, like all about this is the service, this is about us, and that sort
Hmm.
of thing. When you make this shift to really putting your clients as the hero of the story and what you do, I think that really changes everything. So like even if you're just kind of coming away from listening to this conversation with that just a different mindset, I think that is
Hmm.
impactful. And then that kind of leads into kind of simple things that you kind of laid out to us, like giving them a plan. Like, oh, I could easily put that on my website. To get started, schedule a free consultation. That's the
Hmm.
plan, like to get started.
Hmm.
And then the call to action. I can't tell you how many times there's no call to action on a landing page for a specific service. Like, well, what
Right.
are they supposed to do? Where are they supposed to go next? Give them
Yeah.
that option. So it's yes, it's big. It's a big shift in sort of the mindset, but when you kind of start applying it to what you're doing and you think about it this way, it's those simple little tweaks that I think make a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, you have, and then the next, I was going to think like as practice owners too, if you have clinicians working on like helping them understand how they are the guide and,
Hmm.
that type of thing. Because if
Yeah.
you have a whole practice full of guides, like just imagine the brand equity and how well you're going to be known in that community
Yeah.
where, you know what I mean? Like this
Yeah.
practice is the place for you to get help for your marriage, or
Right.
this person is the person to go to get help for your anxious child or
Yeah.
whatever it might be.
Yeah.
um, I was, oh yeah, I was gonna say something else about guide, but then I forgot. But yeah, like
All right.
I think you can really explore it. I think for those listening is like really think through those areas that you need to be working on in like in your guidance,
Yeah.
because you can apply it everywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
in a way that because you are inherently a guide because you are even a parent,
Right.
you know,
Yeah. Absolutely.
is and to lean into that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Here's what I was gonna say. As you'll notice in storytelling, guides rarely guides rarely go through a transformational process. The guides are the same at the very beginning and at
Mm,
the end.
yeah.
And if they go through a transformational process, it's there could be something about their essence that change, but about their character and who they are deep down never changes.
Mm,
So like Dumbledore is the same throughout.
yeah.
Gandalf, yeah, he does change. He does, but he's always the same.
Hmm.
His changes, he just becomes more powerful.
Right.
Right. So you know, if you think about, I'll say this one, like in Maverick was a tough one, and Top Gun, because he's the hero in the first movie, and he's kind of the hero in the second movie, but he's actually more of a guy than he is a hero, because his
Right.
transformational arc in the second movie is more like he just needs to wrap up some loose ends in his relationships with the girl, and
Hmm.
you know, can he be the guide for Goose's son, right? Can
Right.
he, and then can he
Yeah.
actually guide these people? So it's kind of an
Hmm.
interesting combination. Like Tom Cruise still, you know, he's still the
Yeah.
hero, right? It's
Right.
his movie,
Right.
but he's positioning himself more as the guide. Okay, and
Hmm.
I'll say this one last thing. If you can become, you will really establish your practice as the number one trusted practice. If you begin to turn those heroes begin to turn into guides.
Mm,
So what do I mean by that? Um, So after you're done working with a client for a while, they're actually going out and talking to their friends how they can get healthier. Like, here are things that
yeah.
I've learned in
Yeah.
my therapy that could be helpful for you. And
Yeah.
I know there's been stories, tons of stories of somebody got therapy, really great therapy. And they're like, I'm going to become a therapist. Right. And then
Hmm.
they go to school. There's a
Yeah.
story that's happened to my wife, and to help other people. And now my
Right.
wife has a team of 9 clinicians and they're helping other people. So just
Hmm.
kind of the exponential um, blessings really to the world through
Yeah.
that one
Yeah.
particular guide. So if you are a guide that turns heroes into other guides, that's a really beautiful thing. And that's kind of
Hmm.
the ultimate transformation, I think, in some ways,
Yeah.
of the hero, is the
Yeah.
hero becomes the guide then.
Yeah.
So,
Very
all right, I'm
cool.
going to stop with that.
Well, yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up there. That's just a great just thought to leave folks with. And so why don't you just let us know a little bit more, Brent, about where people can find you, if they want to, receive some help, if you could be the guide for them with their marketing and growth.
Yeah. I mean, if you go to brandyourpractice.com, you can see I have a ton of guides, free guides on everything on growing and scaling your private practice. I mean, at the end of the day, I partner with practice owners to scale them. So a lot of them don't have money to scale, and so I come in with them as kind of like a partnership to help them go that route if they want to grow a group practice. That's how
Mhm.
I've done my business, and I at any given time I have about 10, and that's where I'm at, and I think I have 9 now. Um, the other thing that could be really helpful is that if you do position yourself as a guide, you're going to get clients. And one of the software offerings that I have it's called TheraSaas. So it's an intake CRM. This is really software that helps you organize all those client leads that are coming in, to communicate with them using
Mhm.
automation, HIPAA compliant email, and text messaging, things like that.
Cool.
Before they go into your EHR, you need a system to be able to track potential client leads so they don't fall through the cracks. I
Yeah.
encourage you to go to TheraSaas.com. That's TheraSaas.com. My practice owners are loving it, are loving it. It's
Cool.
been so helpful for them. So,
Cool. Yeah,
those are the two things.
we'll put all that stuff in the show notes for this episode so people can check that out.
Yeah, that'd
And
be great.
thanks so much for your Brent. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
your time,
you're
Brent.
welcome.
And thank you for being you.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, but thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. And I think that folks probably got a lot out of this conversation. So I appreciate having you on.
Oh, good. Well, would love to come back sometime and chat more with you and your clients, or your clients, your listeners. And yeah, thanks for having me. It was a real treat. Thank you.